Our elementary school children regularly practice lockdown drills. That's what our society has come to because we have failed to act on gun violence. It is wrong that we now view these mass shootings as the normal. In fact, it is wrong that we view gun violence in general as the new normal. Tragic mass shootings, they draw our attention, but shootings happen in our communities every day. A 15-year-old boy was shot and killed in Norfolk on Sunday. A little girl was shot and killed at a cookout in Richmond on Memorial Day weekend. 4 people were shot, 1 killed in Portsmouth this past weekend. It is past time to change it. Back in January, I asked the Virginia General Assembly to work with me to stop this violence. I asked them to ban magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. I asked them to make background checks universal, a policy that 90% of the public supports. I asked them to create an extreme risk protective order, a way for law enforcement to ask a court to keep guns away from someone who poses a substantial danger to themselves or others, a concept supported by President Trump's own school safety task force. I asked them to reinstate Virginia's successful 1 handgun a month policy. I asked for tougher penalties for anyone who leaves a loaded gun around a child, and to require anyone whose gun has been stolen to report the theft within 24 hours. And I have supported and will continue to support legislation giving localities more authority to regulate firearms, including in their own government buildings. None of these ideas are radical. None of them violate the Second Amendment. None of them would impair any of my fellow Virginia hunters or sportsmen. None of them would limit anyone from owning a gun who wasn't a felon or a domestic abuser or declared by a judge to be a danger. And none of them passed. In fact, some failed with just 4 votes against them in small subcommittees. We lost 1,028 Virginians due to gun violence in 2017. That's almost 3 people a day. Incredibly, that is more deaths than those due to vehicle accidents. This weekend's tragedy, as well as the tragedies that happen every day across Virginia, must instill in us a new level of urgency to act. If we can save 1 life because we act it now, it is worth it. And so, by the power vested in me by Article 4, Section 6, and Article 5, Section 5 of the Constitution of Virginia, I will summon the members of the Senate and the House of Delegates to meet in special session for the purpose of passing common sense public safety laws. I will propose many of the same ideas that we have proposed before. Universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons to include suppressors and bump stocks, an extreme risk protective order, reinstating the 1 gun a month law, child access prevention, requiring people to report lost and stolen firearms, and expanding local authority to regulate firearms, including in government buildings. I will be asking for votes and laws, not thoughts and prayers. And I ask that the members of the General Assembly engage in an open and transparent debate, and that the bills brought before the legislature are put to a vote by the entire General Assembly. That is why our legislators are voted into office and sent to Richmond. Business as usual, with leadership shielding most of their members from taking tough votes by setting early morning hearings before small subcommittees, won't cut it. Virginians deserve leadership, and they will be watching. The nation will be watching. From the moment the first shots were fired in Virginia Beach, our first responders knew what to do. They rushed to the sound of the gunfire. They responded in less than 2 minutes to the shooting. Our first responders acted to save lives. And indeed, they did save lives. Now, I am calling on the elected officials of this Commonwealth to become second responders. Your duty is clear. Rush to the scene and put a stop to this violence. Heal our Commonwealth. Show Virginians that it doesn't matter what party you're in, we are all Virginians first. And we care about the safety and security of every Virginian, no matter who they are or where they live. There will be those, there are already those, who say it's too soon after the tragedy to talk about responses. I would ask those people, when is the right time? Delay only means what it always means, that there will be a next time, another tragedy, more deaths of innocent people, and when it happens, those same voices will again proclaim that it is too soon to talk about protecting our citizens. I want this to be the last time. I know this will be hard. Doing the right thing is often hard. But this work is not nearly as difficult as the task ahead for the Virginia Beach families who now have to carry on, or for the more than 1,000 Virginia families who lost a loved one due to gun violence. It is right to respond to this tragedy with decisive action. Let Virginia set an example for the nation that we can respond to tragedy with action, that we can turn pain into purpose. Let's get to work. Thank you.
Please have a seat. We are here today because the 150th mass shooting in the United States occurred in Virginia Beach on this past Friday. I want to thank Governor Northam for his leadership at this moment of crisis in our Commonwealth and in our country. I look forward to joining with the legislative body to make sure that in our special session we take action on behalf of all of those families who have been impacted by gun violence here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I was down in Virginia Beach along with the governor and the attorney general over this past weekend, and perhaps one of the most moving moments and experiences that I have ever had was hugging and consoling Dr. E. Ray Cox, Sr., pastor of New Hope Baptist Church in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So Dr. Cox lost his son in the shooting on Friday. His son, Keith Cox, was killed, but he died a hero. He saved the lives of 7 people in that government building before rushing out of a locked and barricaded room to find more lives to save. And yet, on Sunday, it was his father, Dr. Cox, strong in his faith and his conviction, who consoled everyone else in that church. And while we had many prayers and there were tremendous numbers of thoughts that were offered, the message was unmistakable and clear from that family and from that congregation. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. They demanded action, and we demand action. We demand that people take steps, people in positions of authority, as we all are, to be the second responders the governor called us to be, to make sure that this is not simply the next mass shooting, but the last mass shooting in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It is going to take courage and resolve and serious action by serious people. We must stay focused. We cannot be diverted from our mission and our task to keep Virginians safe, to enact common sense gun safety legislation and gun violence prevention measures. It is one of the callings of our time, and we must rise to this moment in our history. I just came back from the United Kingdom, where I was for about a week with a delegation, a place where they do not experience the level of gun violence and mass shootings anywhere near what we experience here in the United States of America. It is a problem that is virtually non-existent anywhere else in any other industrialized nation outside of the United States of America. We have a serious issue, and we must take serious action to resolve it. So on behalf of all of the families who are grieving, the 12 individuals who lost their lives, the 4 individuals who are fighting for their lives as we speak right now, it is time for us to stand up with one voice, to work together to ensure that this never happens again. God bless you all. In the memory of Keith Cox and all those beautiful lives we lost, let's act now. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Governor Northam, for your leadership in calling this special session to address the gun violence emergency. I am beyond heartbroken that Virginia Beach is the latest community in America to be touched by the pain and inexplicable violence of a mass shooting. In the difficult days ahead, we will continue to pray for and do all we can to support the families of the victims, the survivors, and the entire Virginia Beach community, because this pain and trauma really ripples through entire communities. And it makes me as angry as it does sad that Virginia Beach is now on the list of cities that you name as the site of a mass murder. And it's not even the only Virginia community on that list. After the horrific tragedy at Virginia Tech, politicians in Virginia and in Washington said all the right things. We'll never forget. We'll remember. We have to do something. And yet, 12 years later, nothing has changed. 12 years later, we still live in a country and a commonwealth where something like this not only can happen, but does happen all the time. Other countries have disgruntled employees, troubled students, abusive spouses, but ours is the only country that gives them easy access to guns. And the result is a country where you could be shot and killed at church or your synagogue, mosque, or place of worship, at an elementary, middle, high school, or college, at the movies, a concert, a nightclub, on the playground, at the office, in the newsroom, at a government building, or in the mall. Life doesn't have to be this way, and it shouldn't be this way. Through inaction caused by partisan obstruction, we are forcing an entire generation of young people to grow up with the trauma of mass shootings and the lingering fear that this could happen to them. And while mass shootings shock us and grab our attention. The fact is, there are people needlessly dying in Virginia every single day at the end of the barrel of a gun. The CDC estimated there were more than 1,000 gun deaths in Virginia in 2017. That's almost 3 a day in Virginia. Just a few days ago, a 9-year-old girl, Markia Dixon, was shot and killed in a playground not far from here. So this is an emergency. And there are things out there we can and should do right now to save lives and make our communities safer. And that's why I am so thankful that Governor Northam, through his leadership, is calling on this special session. Universal background checks, a ban on high-capacity magazines, reinstatement of the assault weapons ban and 1 gun a month, red flag laws, and gun violence restraining orders. The time is now. We can't wait any longer. Every day we fail to act, we dishonor the memory of those lost, and we give our blessing to a status quo that ought to horrify us.
Good morning. Thank you, Governor Northam, for your unwavering leadership in this issue. I would like to frame my remarks within the context of Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. The Virginia Beach tragedy is yet another avoidable act of gun violence in our nation. Yet our Republican colleagues tell us now is not the time to discuss taking action. Dr. King was told his actions in 1963 were unwise and untimely. His response in his letter is what I choose to say to my colleagues today. To say to wait almost always means never. And justice too long delayed is justice denied. Dr. King also stated, it is a tragic misconception of time to assume that the mere passage of time will inevitably cure all ills. The passage of time will not fix the problem. It is the passage of legislation that we need. Each General Assembly session, we have had opportunities to take meaningful action, to take action to stem the tide of gun violence that takes the lives of hundreds of Virginians every year. Our communities like Virginia Beach, Hampton, and Newport News, communities that I represent, where we have lost 11 lives since January, must have confidence that their elected representatives will be responsible enough to enact reasonable and sensible gun legislation that makes their interests, their lives, and their families a priority over that of the gun lobby. Now is the time. We have waited long enough. Not one more life.
Good morning. My name's Eileen Filler-Korn. I'm the House Minority Leader. The shooting that took place in Virginia Beach Friday afternoon was an unspeakable tragedy. Our hearts again are broken for the innocent lives that were lost and the families whose lives have been forever changed. And we are very grateful for the first responders who risked their lives to save so many. Tragedies like the one in Virginia Beach should never, ever happen. But they do, and with such a frequency that is shocking. And after each one, we turn to each other, we ask ourselves, what can we do as legislators to keep Virginians and people safe? After the Parkland shooting last year, the nation followed the activism of students, and we watched the momentum grow across the United States for gun safety legislation. And in Florida, reasonable gun safety measures were passed. Florida. Many of us in office hoped this would lead to gun safety legislation passing here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But it did not. Instead, Speaker Cox formed the Select Committee on School Safety. Those of us in the Democratic caucus were dismayed to learn that this Select Committee would not discuss gun violence prevention or deal with gun safety legislation at all. With that, the House Democrats formed the Safe Virginia Initiative to fill that void. As part of SVI, we traversed the Commonwealth for 8 months, organizing roundtables and organizing town hall meetings with the goal to hear from Virginians from all over the Commonwealth. These town halls span different regions, demographics, and issues of gun violence throughout the Commonwealth. But what they all had in common was community members, law enforcement, experts who showed real concern and demanded that action stem this epidemic. Through this initiative, House Democrats crafted a reasonable package of common sense gun safety bills. SVI policy recommendations were common sense solutions that came up time and time again at each of these town hall meetings. There was no suggestions for taking guns away from law-abiding citizens. There was a desire, however, to make it more difficult for individuals who are at risk of harming themselves or others to have easy access. We spoke to Republican colleagues and offered to work with them. We wanted to work across the party lines. We asked Republican members, where can we find commonality? What can we do? Is there common ground, and is there a way for us to work together? Once again, as they have done year after year, the Republicans said no. Again and again, they said no. When it comes to guns, doing nothing is not an option. As we have done so many times, I'm asking members on the other side of the aisle to please work with us, to please come together, please do something. I think about the families who have lost loved ones in Virginia Beach. I think of so many families involved in so many shootings. I hear from constituents, we all do, who have lost loved ones. There are advocates here who have lost family members or have had loved ones injured. Several of my colleagues standing here have lost loved ones. Many of us have personal stories. We cannot stop every shooting, but we can make it harder for those who should not have a gun to get one. We as legislators in office, we're here to make and improve lives, to make lives better for our constituents. That includes passing bills which could save lives. Governor, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for gathering us here today in order to do something about this epidemic. Thank you for your willingness to do whatever it takes to make us safer. We cannot wait for November. We cannot wait for January. Now is the time. Doing nothing is not an option.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Charnella Herring. I'm chair of the House Democratic Caucus. And my thoughts and prayers do remain with the family, the friends, the co-workers, and the loved ones of Virginia Beach, and especially the community. My heart is still very heavy when I think about those who are injured and the family members who are sitting by their side, not knowing what lies ahead. After a mass shooting, I can only imagine the grief. I grieve for the lives, but I also grieve for our legislature, because year after year, we have failed to pass gun safety measures in the General Assembly. We must do better. This is not about politics. This is not about party. We must do better. People must be able to interact with their government at a city hall or municipal building without fear. They must be able to go to work and go to school and go to a movie and not have to fear that that may be the last act of their life. We have experienced in Virginia unmitigated pain and senseless violence before, and now it's happened again. We cannot afford to stand idly by any longer. I want Virginians to hear me and hear me clearly on this. We can both grieve and get to work. We can grieve and come together to pass gun safety legislation. We can strengthen our mental health services. We can make our schools safer by giving them resources, but we can also pass common sense gun laws. We do not have to choose just one option. We are better than this, Virginia. We cannot continue to grieve without action. We can act, and we're going to come together. And thank you, Governor, for calling this special session. Let's get to work, please.
I want again to thank all of you for being here this morning, and indeed it is time for us to get to work, and I look forward to people coming to Richmond in a couple of weeks from both sides of the aisle to address these gun safety pieces of legislation and to pass these. I want the entire General Assembly to vote on these, and moving forward we can make Virginia a safer place. So I'd be glad to take some questions. Yes, Greg.
Governor, some Republicans have said that some of these specific measures you're talking about would not have actually prevented the shooting in Virginia Beach. How do you respond to that?
Well, there are some of the measures that certainly address what happened in Virginia Beach, Greg, certainly giving localities the authority to regulate their government offices, assault weapons, especially the use of suppressors or what we refer to as silencers. So some of these proposed pieces of legislation do address those, but I think looking at the bigger picture, Greg, as I said earlier, we lost over 1,000 Virginians last year to gun-related deaths, and this is about making Virginia safer. These are common sense pieces of legislation. We have introduced them year after year. They have never received a fair hearing. I'm asking that they do receive a fair hearing when we call the legislators back to special session, and I'm asking that the entire General Assembly vote on them. Yes, sir.
Why do you think the vote counts will be different now as compared to when they voted back in January or February?
You know, I think a good example is our revoking driver's licenses. When that particular piece of legislation made it to the floor, it passed with 70% of the legislators. I want these pieces of common sense gun safety legislation to get to the floor and let individuals that have been elected by you, the people, to come to Richmond and cast their vote, green or red. That's what we're asking our legislators to do.
Do you have any reason to think they will get a full vote on the floor, or is that just something you're hoping for and asking for?
Well, these are, again, common sense pieces of legislation. I would ask our legislators to listen to Virginians. I would ask Virginians to contact their legislators between now and when we come back for special session. And if indeed we listen to the voices across Virginia that are asking, they have been asking for years for gun safety measures, I think they will get the votes they need to pass and become law and make Virginia a safer place for all of us to live. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, you were in Virginia Beach standing side by side with some of the Republican representatives down in Virginia Beach. Did you have conversations with them at all about these plans, and if so, what were those interactions like?
We had conversations that we were there to support Virginia Beach, to support the agencies, to certainly support these families that are, I can't imagine the mourning that they are going through, the grief that they're experiencing. As far as particular legislation, I didn't have any of those conversations.
Anything else? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.